everyone, glad you could be with me on Tony Tonkin Show. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically today is Rupert Murdoch. The reason why I think that it's important to talk about Rupert, as I personally know him, is because he originally set up a business here in Adelaide, where I come from. Now, Adelaide has a population of, or maybe South Australia has a population of 1.5 million, Adelaide being the capital of South Australia, for those of you that are overseas who don't know where we are. And we are in Australia, and believe it or not, we're in the south of Australia, hence the name creatively called South Australia. So here in South Australia and Adelaide, where I am broadcasting from now, we had a bloke by the name of Rupert Murdoch establish a business here called The News. Funnily enough, News Corp probably comes from his paper that he set up here called The Advertiser. Now, Rupert Murdoch was the son of Keith Murdoch, who originally lived in Melbourne, which is in Victoria, a neighbour to South Australia. And Keith had a son and a couple of daughters, and one of them was Rupert. Keith changed his name from Keith Rupert, I think it must have been, to Keith Rupert Murdoch, because clearly he didn't like his father, so he chose his mother's father's name. So hence the reason we wound up eventually with Rupert Murdoch, the son. Now, for some years I've been very proud of the fact, I guess, that we here in little old lowly Adelaide, where most people don't know that we do exist, established a media network that travels around the world, that influences people around the world. Now, I've for years, though, to be fair, have not been very happy with the way Rupert Murdoch has run his business, but there again, Rupert Murdoch wouldn't even know I exist, so who really cares? However, I do care, because Rupert has come from this lowly little business here in Adelaide and developed a business that has stretched its tentacles right around the world. Now, he didn't come from humble beginnings. He went to Geelong Grammar and went, I think, eventually to Oxford. So he's clearly not an idiot in terms of his intellectual capacity. But at some point, power became the dominant feature of Rupert Murdoch. Around the world, he's endeavoured to influence the way we think about politics in Britain. He became a friend of Margaret Thatcher. He actually moved from a sense of, well, he actually worked while at university. I think he ran a club which was a Labour-based club, kind of a left-wing-based club, whatever that looked like back in the 30s. But whatever his politics was back then, it clearly has shifted to something else. And at some point, the notions around power and influence have dominated his thinking, and one of his son's thinkings in particular, whereby controlling what the rest of us, or what most of us may want to hear or need to hear, is determined by Rupert Murdoch. We know here with The Advertiser here in Adelaide, which was his flagship initially, we know that it has a very right-wing type leaning, even though, to be fair, it isn't as bad as some right-wing newspapers. However, it does have a Murdoch influence. Recently, though, has spread his influence far and wide, particularly to the UK, and then beyond that to the United States. He determined, I guess, he decided, I should say, to become a citizen of the US when he realised that it was probably in his best interest around tax-wise, and it was also his best interest because if you're going to influence anybody, let's make it the most powerful, most potentially right-wing, crazy society that one could think of, apart from North Korea. So there he was influencing what happened in the US through, eventually, Sky News. Now recently, with the shootings of 10 people in Buffalo in the US, it has become dominant. Sorry, I'll reframe that. It has become evident that the influence that he has had on Fox News and the peddling of misguided information has become a dominant feature of the United States political landscape. So when he's talking about theories that suggest that white people are soon to be eradicated from the face of the earth because they're going to be overtaken by coloured people or minorities or Jews or African Americans or Muslims or some other group of people, when he decides to start to influence the way that people think, not those people that are educated like himself, not people that can think rationally, but people who have inbred hostility towards other groups of people, and not necessarily minorities. When you start to foster those beliefs, when you start to want to reinvent society in your image, then those godlike qualities need to be called out. Now, there are the likes of people like Tucker Carlson who spread continually those views. In fact, I think the New York Times came out with a report, or the Washington Post, I might stand corrected. One of them came out with a report that said that over the last 4 or 5 years, there has been some 400 comments made by Tucker Carlson, which has been spreading conspiracy theories that, in a sense, brought about the radicalisation of this individual who killed those 10 people in Buffalo. At some point, though, we need to start to make a stand against people like Rupert Murdoch. Rupert wants to influence political decisions. He wants us to vote for those people that represent him the most, that have his ideas, so that he can influence the way the political structures of certain countries are shaped. It is our job to ensure that that does not happen. We can push back against people such as Rupert Murdoch by making choices about who it is that we vote for, who are not abiding by the principles and values that people like Murdoch hold. The best way to do that, I think, is probably to turn off from people like Tucker Carlson and others, but also to become more rational in the way that we view the way society should be. We all need to hold principles that tell us that we are all made equal, no matter who we are, no matter the colour of our skin or our religious background or our ethnicity. We are all the same. We vary in terms of our tastes and sometimes our values and our principles and the way we want to conduct our lives. We're all also, amongst that mix, individuals. But we need to be able to celebrate everybody's individuality, regardless of sexuality and so on. Now, there comes a time when that pushback needs to take place, and we need to make that pushback right now, because if we don't, we will find that the minority will become the majority, that those people that hold these radical views, these unethical, sad views, will start to dominate in terms of who we have elected, not just in the United States, but in the UK, Europe, and eventually it will happen here in Australia. So at some point we need to make that stand, and the stand that we need to make against people like Rupert Murdoch, and to call them out, and people like Tucker Carlson, who are just obnoxious individuals, we need to make that stand now. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.